Well, hey, my friend, I'm so glad that you are with me on the podcast today. I've got a special friend with me who I've known for a number of years, super talented, actually one of my favorite artists, and not,
Oh,
not just
thanks.
person, but artist. Tina Honorkamp is here from Waynesville, North Carolina. Tina, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, wow. Thanks for asking me. I was so honored. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have loved getting to know you and your husband, Nick, who's one of the most awesome guys I think I know,
Oh,
and
thank you.
speaker, leader, all of that. But I can't wait for folks to hear your story today. Let everybody know kind of who you are, where you're from, what you do creatively, and then we'll kind of jump into a little bit of your backstory.
Sure. Great. I'm Tina Hunterkamp. Like you said, I born and raised here in Western North Carolina, and started out as a pastor's wife and a mom, and now I'm a full-time artist. So,
And it just happened that easy, did it? Just like that. Just
oh
ding, ding,
yeah,
ding.
suddenly.
I love it. Now, did you
Yeah.
grow up painting and doing your art as a kid and all through high
Yeah.
school and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so my dad worked a lot, and it's just me, my mom, and my sister. So I would draw constantly.
Yeah.
That I mean, whenever you found me, I'd be drawing. So it started there, and I had a love for fashion as well. So I would pretend like I was a fashion designer
Yeah.
and draw and stuff like that. So yeah, it started real young. It's always been there, but it just never got honed until later in life. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So you actually took that to college then, right? And started actually developing that as a degree. And what was the plan at
My
that
degree,
point?
yeah. So a little bit of a backstory. There was a tragedy that happened in my senior year of high school. My sister committed suicide and took her own
Mm,
life.
wow.
And so that kind of just shook our whole world up.
Yeah.
So I had, grand plans of going off and becoming a fashion designer. And so I had to readjust a little bit to help my family out. So I ended up at Western Carolina University and took clothing, textiles, and merchandising,
Yeah.
and ended up graduating with a Bachelor of Science degree from there. And then married the love of my life 2 weeks later. So,
Tanya and I were talking the other day. We'll be married 25 years in coming up. I
congratulations.
know
Yeah.
coming up in April, but we were sitting there watching TV the other night, and I made a comment, and she said, "I think we're old," and I said, "We are not old," but I said, "But
No.
doggone it, it has been 25 years, and it goes so quickly, doesn't it? I mean,
Oh,
life just
it
happens."
does. It does. And you just look back and you can see God through it all.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
yeah.
you guys jumped into ministry and kids and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure in your
Hmm.
story, like a lot of our story, your art, if it's not the forefront, and usually it's not, it starts as a hobby, for a lot of us, it
I
kind of
know.
gets pushed to the back. And that I know that was your
Absolutely.
story, right?
Oh yes, and I can feel for lots of women out there who want to be full-time artists, and I'd just say go for it. Because looking back, I mean, I have hindsight, but when I was in college, I had a lady that asked me to illustrate a book for her,
Mm,
and so I did pen and ink drawings for this lady who did French heirloom sewing with a lot of smocking and a lot of
yeah.
lace. So I'd use pen and ink drawings, and I'd like to say my art career took off from there, and I became a wild success, but it just didn't happen. I've married a pastor, and with the pastor and the church and kids, and life does just take over.
Yeah. Were you creating all during that time just for fun, or was it really kind of just on the back burner totally?
It was really on the back burner.
Mm,
I would say it was on the back burner probably until the kids graduated high school, and I looked around and said, now what?
yeah.
And I think as a pastor's wife too, there's a lot of expectations, and people just assume you're called into, you know, the church ministry as well.
Sure.
And everybody is to a certain extent,
Right.
but I wasn't the typical, like I didn't preach, I didn't teach a lot because
Yeah.
it just felt like wearing Saul's armor.
Yeah.
And about 2016 is when I really started to feel like I was called to create.
I look back at our journey, and every time that there's been a transition or some kind of major shift in our life, the Lord is not only speaking to us, but he uses people in our life prophetically as well to think,
Yes.
hey, have you been thinking about this? Or what about this? Or I just want to kind of submit this to you for your thoughts. What was going on around you as you were thinking about what was next? What
Yes,
step do you take? Because that was a big deal.
it was a big deal. And, we, in 2016, I would say we really started honing in and pressing into the Lord in prayer. And so we would spend hours going to prayer meetings. And so in my personal time, I would just press in as, turn on worship music, get in my little studio I'd set up because I didn't know what to do other than draw or sew or do something I already knew to do.
Yeah.
And it was one of those instances where I've never had it happen before. I've never had it happen since. But I was just pressing into the Lord, and I got this prophetic download. And I just started writing and crying at the same time. And I couldn't see, and I didn't know what was going on. And afterwards, I wiped my eyes and I looked at the paper, and it was a prophetic word about what God had, who he calls me.
Wow.
And it just started off, I won't go into all of it because it's pretty long and lengthy, but it just started out as, you are a tree bearing both fruit and flower. And so he just goes on to tell me who he created me to be. And it was life-changing. I've never had it happen like that since. And so Nick comes home. He had been at a place called the Fig Tree praying, and he comes home and I tell him all about it. And he looks at me and he says, well, what kind of tree are you? And I said,
that totally sounds like
what he was saying. I know. I said, I don't know.
I need the details. I need the specifics of this. Right.
And I said, well, God didn't give me that part. And so we went on, and I just knew then that he had a special calling for me. Because lots of times we get caught up in our partner's calling too.
Yeah, sure.
And so you can't see to separate. And so I was like praying and asking the Lord, and hey, am I an oak tree, and and he just never said. And so I was in church service that was in the spring, and then I was in church service in the fall. And I'm sitting in the service, and he just says, you're an almond tree. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And so I rush home, Google almond tree. And the first thing that pops up is this image of a branch with an almond and a flower on it at the same time.
Wow.
Just like the word he gave me.
That's right.
And so the cool thing about the almond tree is the growth season is so long that sometimes the flowers will come on in the spring before the almonds have fallen off in the fall.
Wow. So
it just takes a long time. And he was just telling me I was right on track. I wasn't too late, because I've always been worried that I was too behind the curve. I'm now 53. Have you missed it? That kind of thing. But no, he said that word just so I would know that I'm right on track.
I just love that, because I think so many of us, depending on how you grew up and, the spiritual grid that you had in your life, I grew up with a lot of that, thinking, I've missed it. I've missed God, or I'm going to do it wrong. And, I don't want to mess it up. And so you just end up getting paralyzed. But I love the fact that when you felt like you were to start back, you just kind of started with what was in your hand, what you had, just kind of starting every day.
Yes.
I mean, it really is as simple as that, isn't it?
It is. And it's so funny because one of my favorite quotes is from Emerson, and he says, do the thing and you shall get the power.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, it's so simple. Just start doing something. And as you do it, God kind of directs you as you go.
Yeah.
And so that's just how it kind of started for me.
As you started pursuing your work, I think that's probably about the time I started seeing your work show up on Facebook and that sort of thing. And I was like, obviously we both have a great love for nature, and nature shows up a lot in your work. And so I was immediately like, Oh my gosh, this is incredible. I've become a Tina artwork addict,
Oh, thank you.
which is wonderful. But in fact, I'm thinking about the piece that I just bought from you that was called, I think it was called Always Fruitful, which
Yes.
now
Yeah.
means so much more hearing your story.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
has nature always kind of been the predominant theme of what you love to create in your art?
Yeah, it really has, because I just feel this connection um, to the environment and the creations of God, and so um, I just started when I didn't always paint,
Yeah.
because I was started as an illustrator, and so I ran into a lady in the community that's a really well-known oil painter, and she encouraged me to start painting with her, and I'm like, I've never painted in my life. And I'll just tell you, this was 4 years ago, going on 5. So I've not been in a full-time painter for very long. It's
Yeah.
just been a very short period of time. So to see what God's done in that short period of time it blows my mind to even just think about it.
Yeah.
So I started oil painting, and of course I gravitated to cherry blossoms,
Yes.
and they look very similar to almond trees. So that's just where I started, and it kind of just took off from there.
So I know, Tina, starting your own business, if you've not ever had business experience, is probably something that has been a little overwhelming too. I love it that as you stepped out, the Lord brought the prophetic inspiration, and then He brought a mentor into your life and that sort of thing. So what's this been like, walking in that side of things? Because that can be overwhelming sometimes.
It is. In fact, the business side, I think, is my biggest challenge. Even today, I have a hard time selling myself, and I have to realize it's the gift of God that I'm trying to promote, not me.
Yeah.
So it's still very difficult. But when I did meet Jenny, she did become my mentor, and we just kind of hit it off and started talking, and we're like, what if we just open our own gallery?
Yeah.
What if we just, found our own studio space? And God just opened these doors as we started looking. And we found this area in Haywood County. It's on North Main Street in Waynesville. And it came with its own like workshop space in the back. So then we started doing workshops.
It's
And
beautiful and huge. I love it.
I know it's truly a gift from God. I will just say that. And I even look at the sales He brings in, and I just can't explain it any other way than He has truly divinely just directed our paths.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Are you doing, as far as, how your business looks like now? I know a lot of people teach, do prints, do originals, do
Yes.
commissions, do shows, do online. What is because obviously everybody that's listening is an artist in some realm. So I think it's always interesting for folks to know what kind of your business it looks like, as far as how you have the rhythm of what's going on every week. Right.
So right now we are closed on Monday and Tuesdays, and open the gallery on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, by appointment on Saturdays, so that we can keep on the creative flow. Because when you get into the retail aspect of it, it can really get draining, and the creativity is kind of hard to get in the river. And so we just determined, because it's just us, we kind of set the hours, and you just have to
good to be the queen, right?
You just have to really create that, protect that creative time, and be intentional about it. So get up at same time every morning, go into the studio. During COVID, because we did a grand opening November of 2019, this big grand opening, it was real huge success. And then in March 2020, COVID hit.
Right.
And so Jeannie and I were just like, well, our life hasn't changed. So we got up every morning, went into the studio every morning, stayed all day, and did what we needed to do.
And made a huge amount of inventory. That was great.
Yes. It's a fact. And so Jeannie's, she is very successful at her oil painting. And I have been too, to a certain degree. My fifth oil painting I did was of our dog Scout, and it got entered into the Oil Painters of America Salon Show and got accepted. And that was my fifth oil painting.
Wow.
And so I was in that show. And then the next year, the cherry blossoms I did was in the Steamboat Springs Gallery in Colorado. So God just opened those doors.
Yeah.
And I love oil painting, but I've kind of even tried to go back a little bit to the illustration. And since April, I started doing wildlife illustrations. And I've done 29 and sold 24 of them since April.
Awesome?
So
are you finding that people are loving the smaller work, or just the different aesthetic, or what's the balance?
I'm still trying to figure that out, because God gave me a dream. And so I just kind of looked at it as a way to communicate with my grandson. We have a little grandson who lives in the city. And I thought, well, I'll just draw him pictures of my animals out in my front yard.
Yeah.
And started doing them, and people were like, "Are you selling those?" And
I can't.
I said, I guess I am. And so God opened that door, and I'm hoping, we'll see. His dream to me was to do a book. So we'll see if that happens. He makes all things possible. So right. I just got to focus in on that this year. So
that's right. You're saying things that, I love. God said this, I did that. He showed me this, I did that. I know that, Tina, you and Nick are both passionate about identity and heart healing and walking in who God's called you to be, and that sort of thing. Just talk about that from the perspective of being able to walk in what God's called you to do, because I know that really for you set such a platform and foundation that when God said go and when he says move, you're confident and ready to do that. Talk about that process in your own life, because I know that's not for all of us. It's not just an automatic thing that happens. Right. There's got to be some intentionality around that.
Thanks for bringing that up, because I think I just take it for granted. Yeah. And I don't look at it because the church we were raised in was big on inner healing.
Yeah.
And I just thought everybody got inner healing. I didn't know any different. And so I had a lot of inner healing, and I thought I was doing great, and then God says, no, I called you to create. And so I start creating, and all this stuff starts coming up, like all this insecurity and self-doubt. And I talked to myself horrible. My self-talk was awful.
Yeah.
And I realized there's stuff still in me that I had to get healed so that the beauty that was there could come out.
Yeah, that's so good.
And I just, I'm a big proponent on inner healing.
Yeah.
And because the more pure you are, like Matthew 5:8 says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God.
Yeah.
And I truly believe the more pure and the more healed I get, the more I will see him.
Yeah.
And so that's what I strive for in my artwork.
Yeah, I just love that. I tell people all the time, just because you got saved, Jesus, you're saved, you're going to heaven, he loves you. But
oh my goodness,
all of us, we've been living off of a broken framework, a broken grid, a blueprint.
That's absolutely
a different world. And that's what the sanctification process is about, coming out of agreement with that old way of doing things and into agreement with who he's called us to be. And I love that, that's been such a big part of your journey and mine as well. Just helping people to realize that is not something that you just kind of land in or just happens. That's an intentional process. And
it absolutely is.
As artists, because it's so intuitive and because we're so connected with God's heart, I think it's an easy place for us to allow God to speak to us and not only use our art for our benefit and for bring provision in our life and all that, but also as this kind of cathartic place of healing for us as well.
Oh yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I think, I don't know how artists do it that don't have that in their lives, because art is so personal, and you're so vulnerable when you're putting it out there, especially to the marketplace. and people get to vote on it. And then,
Sure.
so, yeah, you just really have to know who you are, who he called you to be.
Yeah.
And that comes through healing, I think.
It does.
Mhm.
Well, Tina, you've got an incredible story, and your work is incredible. I know folks are going to
Thank
want to
you.
find out more about what you're doing, follow you on social, and even come to visit the gallery
Oh,
if
absolutely.
if
Yeah,
they're in
that'd
the
be
area.
lovely.
So where's the best place they can connect with you online to find out more about what you're doing?
So I do have a personal website where people can purchase artwork. So it's tinahonorcampart.com. And also, I'm also on social media, Tina Honorcamp Art, Instagram, Facebook, definitely both of those. And social media has been a godsend during 2020.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
for artists, it's been wonderful.
Well, we'll put all those links in the show notes, both on the podcast and YouTube, so folks can go visit you and see what you're doing. But Tina, thank you
Thanks.
for
Thank you for the honor.
just sharing your journey and living the life. And I can't wait to see your new work, and hopefully I can get a bigger house so I can put more work in it. So.
That'd be great.
Thanks for being on the podcast with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.